That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hello, and welcome to episode 55 of Only Human. Today we've got a special podcast, special event based podcast. It's not the one that I promised you on motivation, but that's coming next time. But just yesterday, my latest book got up on Amazon, and just this morning we had our first online sale. So I wanted to use this podcast to talk to you a little bit about what the book is about, why I think it's important, and perhaps most importantly, how it fits in to this entire idea of growing where we are with the resources at hand. So without further ado, let me introduce you to a book called Armored Knight by me. The subtitle is The Relentless Pursuit of Resolve, Resilience, and Recovery from Life's Challenges. So today what I'd like to do is sort of take you through the book, and we're going to do that in just a second, but I probably should start by saying this is the third book in a trilogy that began about 12 years ago with Blue Threat, Why to Err is Inhuman, How to Wage and Win the Battle Within. And that book was all about using our introspection and resolve to attack things that we had control over with regards to making errors. And so in this book, we highlighted 48 different types of errors, how we can identify them, how we can track them, and how, in many cases, we can eliminate common errors that we tend to repeat. So that book did pretty well. And I followed that up a few years later with a book that many of you know called Going Pro, The Deliberate Practice of Professionalism, where we took those same ideas of self-inspection and introspection, but instead of looking at mistakes we made, it looked at opportunities to grow professionally, what that meant, what it looked like. And then this book, although I say in the very beginning I should have written this book first, this book completes the trilogy, and it does so by taking the same skill sets, this idea that we need to look at ourselves first, and using that as what's called the first principle of self-leadership. And I just want to read you the little blurb that is on the back of the book, give you some idea. It says self-leadership is the first principle of greatness. And greatness comes in many forms. From the C-suite executive trying to overcome unforeseen challenges to the recovering addict or single mom scratching out an existence day to day. Armored Knight takes us on an epic and sometimes perilous journey through a fractured world with key insights on how to build psychosocial strength, choose allies, and overcome our most difficult challenges. Inside these covers, you'll learn how to fight the three-headed dragon of apathy, frustration, and cynicism in what seems like, and perhaps is, an infinite battle between average and excellence, and perhaps even between good and evil. Now, this cool last line here I really like, although some people tried to get me to take it out. So saddle up, Sir or Madam Knight. We have foes to vanquish. So Armored Knight, the concept is basically that as you're reading this, you're the hero of this story, right? And in any hero story, there come times when this unlikely hero comes up against insurmountable challenges. Most of the good ones, something happens at that moment. Maybe they find a mentor, powerful gift. If it's a video game, you find the right little thing to pick up and you can vanquish the next foe. So the concept of us all being knights in our own right and picking up armor that we are capable of forging ourselves provides us the opportunity to wade into this dangerous, complex, sometimes chaotic world with some degree of confidence. And I will walk through the various parts of the book with you here today in just a second, but the idea behind this is that we can never truly be ready, but we can always be prepared. Now, when we talk about readiness, there's two sides to that equation, right? We only know if we're ready for something once that something appears. Yet we can constantly prepare for as many variations of what that thing might be. So one of the core lines in this book is that we're never truly ready, only prepared. And so the goal of the book is to help us all to become more prepared through a variety of means to meet the challenges of life, big and small, short duration, long duration, life-threatening or trivial. So let's take a look at what's in this thing that took me about 5 years to complete. And I told you, I think on the last podcast, that I really didn't write on it for 5 years. There were periods of writer's block and creative stalemate where I couldn't figure out how to piece it all together. But I think it came together pretty nicely. So the book starts out with part 1, The Armored Knight. Part 2 is called Slaying the Three-Headed Dragon. And part 3 is called The Infinite Battle. And in The Armored Knight, what we do is almost each chapter starts out with a historical case study. And the book starts out with the story of Prince Edward, the Black Prince, surrounded by his French adversaries, and somehow uses his leadership, skill, and cunning, taking advantage of the ego and arrogance of the French king that's got him surrounded to save the day. And in each and every one of these chapters, there is a story that leads off that sort of illustrates the concepts that are in the chapter. So we begin with the Armored Knight and the story of Prince Edward, the Black Prince, who is, by the way, never defeated in battle, kind of tells the story of the preparation of a knight, how they grew up from, being a page and a squire to eventually going through the rigors of full certification of knighthood. And even though, he was the son of a king, so he probably had it a little easier than other knights that come up from various realms of life, he still had to go through all of those rigors. And it wasn't just how to fight with a sword or fight with an axe or ride a horse or use a lance. There are a lot of knightly behaviors, right? Defending the weak, courtesies, customs, traditions, norms, all based on something called the code of a knight. And we'll get to that at the very end here in just a couple of minutes. But it starts out with a description of what knighthood is historically, and then brings it into the modern era. So the next chapter is called The First Principles of Human Performance. And it's important here to explain what first principles are. First principles, originally out of the wisdom of Socrates, maybe Plato, pretty sure it's Socrates, who said a first principle is the most foundational way we know something, right? And I use an example in here. There's a story of a guy who's talking about the greatest football coaches ever. And he says, there's very few coaches, but there's a lot of play stealers. And the interviewer says, what do you mean? He says, well, a true coach coaches from first principles. He is that rare individual who invents a new offense or a new play. Everybody else just tweaks something that's been done before. And I point out that that's kind of what's happened in the human factors world, where just about everything we see now is a tweak on something that's been done before. Safety management systems, crew resource management, I could go on and on. They're all things that have been done 10, 15, 20, even 30 years ago that people come and tweak a little bit. I could go on and on about that, but I decided in this case, because the book deals a lot with mental health, right? Resolve, resilience, and recovery. So it's truly psychosocial strength is a preventative measure and a restorative measure from mental health challenges. And don't we all have some of those? So I point out that the first principle I operate from is that we are all incredibly unique. So unique that what works for others may or may not work for us, right? So the first principle is don't be a place stealer in this regard. Be a true coach. In order to be a knight, you have to coach yourself because you're different. You're unique, right? Now, there's a lot of things that have been done that are definitely applicable, right? A whole bunch of stuff out there that's very, very good. But from the very beginning of this book, we want to establish this idea that I call it a you do you kind of approach to all of this. So the dedication right there in front of chapter 1 says, to everyone and anyone who's thinking about giving up on something you once thought was important, this book is for you. So we talked a little bit about the Armored Knight. We talked about the first principles of human performance. Let's see if I can find the next chapter here. Chapter 2 is called Naked and Afraid. And it begins with a Bible verse out of Genesis. It says, after God asked Adam where he is, he responds, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And the point is, we all come into this world naked and afraid, and 100% dependent on others to take care of us. But over time, we grow the capability to take care of ourselves, and then eventually the capability to take care of others around us. So it's important that we understand a couple of the two biggest enemies that we have to fight. And the first one is fear, right? And the second one is, I wanted to say fearlessness, but it's not the right word, so I use the word pride. The two things we have to understand right from the beginning is that we can become too afraid to become a knight, or we can become too prideful as a knight to give adequate respect to all the dangers that the world holds for us. So the next thing I go into in the book is sort of the model around which our armor is built. And there's really two elements of it. One is external to us, and that really goes into the systems, the networks that we have available to us to help. Maybe it's family, maybe it's a company, maybe it is a safety management system or a training system or a mental health system. We're all part of these things. We all network with a lot of people, or at least most of us do. And the thing that I point out is if you want you want that armor to hold up for you, if you want those things to be available to you at the moment of challenge, and once again, that moment is unknown to us when the next challenge is going to come. If you want someone, something, some system to be available for you, you have to be available for it first, right? So if you want to have a friend you can call in the middle of the night, make sure that you are there for them. If you want a system that's going to support you, make sure you're a part of that system, an active part of that system before you need it. Far too often today, we rely on so many other things, other people, other organizations, only when we need them, right? And we're never part of them before we need them. And that's a huge, huge mistake, a mistake that a true knight doesn't make. So we look a little bit at that, and then we go into the model of psychosocial strength. And there's really 5 parts to this, and I'll spend just a couple of minutes on each part. Most importantly, and we've talked about this in the past on podcasts, is you have to know your purpose, right? You have to know your purpose, not just your purpose at work or your purpose in family, but your overall life purpose. And there's an exercise in here where we take you through how to write your life mission statement. And I've told you mine 100 times. I'll tell it to you here again. It's to help as many as I can, in as many ways as I can, in as many places as I can, for as long as I can. I underline that with all to the glory of God, because on my own I can do nothing. So we work through that process to establish the purpose. Now, why is purpose so important? Understanding your purpose is important because it clarifies a lot of things, right? When you have a decision to make, does it feed your purpose or does it not? When you have a temptation that you're, really wanting to go after or do, does that feed my purpose? Does it serve my purpose in life or does it not? And perhaps most importantly, it provides us an anchor when everything changes, right? When we lose our job or we lose a family member or we get hit in the head with a medical diagnosis. As long as we have an anchor to our purpose, we have somewhere to return to begin again, right? So that's the whole reason behind purpose. Purpose builds resolve, right? I am going to continue to fight through this. I'm going to try to remember this. It's not in the book, but it should be. But I have this quote on my wall in my workout room. It's a quote from Rocky Balboa, and he's talking to his son in probably Rocky 3 or something. And he starts out, it says, the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place. And nobody can survive the hits that the world are going to give you. Right? And he goes on to say that it will knock you to your knees. And if you let it, it will keep you there permanently. The last part's pretty cool too. He says, ain't you, me, or nobody going to hit as hard as life? But it ain't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. I just love that quote. And it sort of epitomizes what's in this book, right? So your purpose will give you that resolve to get hit and get back up and keep pushing. Why? Because you have a reason to, you have a purpose. Now, beyond that, there are 4 shields that the knight builds and forges for himself or herself. There's a mental shield. We have to know things. We have to learn things. We have to continue to grow even after we achieve some of the things that we thought maybe led us to a point where we didn't have to learn anymore. We have to always be learning new things. So that's part of that mental shield. The other thing is, and we've talked about this before as well, we have to have the ability to not only think critically, but to shift the way we are thinking at any moment in time. We have to be able to use that mental agility to recover from emotional moments, to recover from panic, to see through and deal with our biases and the biases of others. So that's all part of the mental shield. The second shield is that emotional shield. And in here, we talk a lot about there really aren't any positive or negative emotions. Like everything else in life, it all depends. What's it depend on? It depends on the situation. Fear, for example, often thought as a negative emotion, or anger can be very useful in certain situations. Fear tells us to run when we should run. Anger gets us up off the floor when there's something worth fighting for. But taken past that point that we teach you how to define here, it can become extremely negative. Joy, passion can be extremely positive, but at the inappropriate moment in time, it can have some really negative consequences for you. So we work through all of the emotional components and pointing out even some neuroscience of how powerful emotions are, and reflect back to the tie-in to that mental strength where you have to have the mental agility to be able to shut down those emotions and get back to the business of thinking things through. So the third shield is the behavioral shield. And that's where we talk about habits, all sorts of habits, a lot of them dealing with our physical selves, right? The habit of sleeping well, eating well, exercising well, stress management or stress control. We talk about how to build habits, and we talk about how to break bad habits, how long it takes, what you need to do to shorten that period of time. All of that stuff is contained in the behavioral strength. And then the last part of the shield is spiritual. And we come at it two ways. We come at it from a secular side, where we basically explain that spirituality, first of all, is proven scientifically to improve all kinds of things: our health, our longevity, our productivity, our careers, proven to do all those things. And yet it's kind of not supposed to be talked about because people think you're talking about God or something. There's a secular way to view this for non-believers, and that's, you just have to feel connected to something larger than yourself. Maybe it's humanity. Maybe it's the cosmos. We talk about how to cultivate a sense of awe, something that we look at and go, man, I'll never understand it, but that's magical, right? The oceans, the cosmos, why trees breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, and we do just the opposite. All those things that we can look at and appreciate, right? But still not ever hope to fully understand. And that leaves us with a sense of awe. On the faith-based side, we go into a lot of things. We go into, what are the basics? What is the nature of sin? What does it mean to be repentant? What does it mean to take those spiritual values, in my case, biblical values, but it really applies across just about any faith, and bring them into practice as a knight? Keep in mind that most knights that we know about, that history records, were tied to one faith or another. Sometimes that led them into wars, right? The Crusades and all that. So that can be bad too. But that's the spiritual shield. So once again, the psychosocial strength model that we apply to the shields for the knight are an underlying foundation of purpose, meaningful life purpose of your own design, your own creation. You don't find your purpose, you create it. Then we go on to mental strength building, emotional strength and strength building, behavioral strength and strength building, and finally spiritual strength and strength building. And that sort of brings us to the end of part one, which is the armored knight. We begin part two, which is a battle against the three-headed dragon, by the way, whose name is Kodap. Kodapp. Kodap stands for killer of dreams, purpose, passion, and potential. But dragons have cool names, so I just stuck with the acronym. And basically, what part two of the book, Fighting the Three-Headed Dragon, it begins with a deep look with a chapter called The Death of Self-Awareness. And it's important that we remain aware of our mindset if we're going to be knights in a fractured world, right? And that awareness needs to include when we might be becoming apathetic, when we might be becoming frustrated, when we might be becoming cynical, right? And I talk about those three things as the three heads of the dragon, right? The first one is apathy, where you think you're on cruise control. Complacency is another good word. I've got the world licked. There's nothing I really need to do. I'm financially stable. I've got a good job. I've got a good family. And so we get lazy. And then something bad happens and gets us off that track, and we get mad. We get frustrated. And then if we can't solve that frustration, our natural human thought process leads us into saying, well, it's not our fault. It's everything else's fault. And we get this deep, dark cynicism where we no longer care what anyone thinks about us because it's all bullshit. They're all out to get us. By that time, we turn into victims, and the dragon circles overhead and eats our soul, our purpose, and our life. So, excuse me, a very quick overview of a pretty cool section in there. By the way, all through this book, there are several self-assessments that after you read the material, you can say, I wonder how I'm doing in that. And there's some very probing questions, little scorecards and all that stuff for you to look at and help you to think deeper about those things. The final part of the book is called The Infinite Battle. And basically what it says is that we are fighting battles in our lives that started long before we entered and will probably continue long after we are no longer here in this plane of existence. But that doesn't mean they're not worth fighting. We get so used to fighting short things, right? Payday to payday. How am I going to pay the bills? Or what happens if my car breaks down? Or all these sort of things that distract us from taking a longer view. And when we take a longer view, we can put some key topics into perspective. We talk about urgency in the infinite battle. We talk about laziness and the advantages of laziness on occasion. In the book, we talk about how we build allies in the infinite battle. We talk about how we build trust between ourselves and those allies. When we can discard allies that are no longer trustworthy or that we no longer serve them, they no longer serve us. All of those things we talk about. So as we kind of go back over all of this, it's all designed to empower us to take a hit and keep moving forward, as Rocky tells us in that quote I probably screwed up really badly earlier, but to keep moving forward with resolve, right? To bounce back with resilience. There's something in here we call the resilience ladder, which begins with, I just want to have enough strength to live to see tomorrow, because we know the epidemic of suicides in our society today is almost unexplainable. And so that first step is, I just want to live to see tomorrow. And the next step up the resilience ladder is, I want to build some kind of future, any kind of future. Right? And then the next step is, I want a good future. And the next step up is, I want other people to have a good future. So this idea of step by step from complete and utter despair back to full on, full power, meeting our life purpose is something we walk through, and something that a knight riding through a fractured world learns to do on his or her own. So we end up with a code in the back of the book. Has the same picture on the front of the book, but it's actually written by Albert Camus. And I want to read it to you because I think it synopsizes everything we're doing. We call it the Code of the Armored Knight. I'm not sure what Albert Camus called it, but it says, in the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer, and that makes me happy. So it made me happy to finish this book. I'm not through writing. I'm not through researching this stuff, but it became time to throw it out at the public. Winston Churchill once said, as a writer, that a book, a manuscript, a writing project begins as a mistress, and then with a wink across the room, it then turns into a wife and someone that you learn to live with and coexist with. And this is completely politically incorrect. I wish I hadn't started it. And then at the end, it's an old hag that you throw out the window and thrust upon the public. But this never turned into an old hag. I'm still married to it, and I'm going to still continue to work. This does complete the trilogy, though, of Blue Threat, Going Pro, and Armored Knight. If you're interested in buying Armored Knight, I have only one favor to ask you. I would ask you to buy it from the publisher, because Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more money. When you buy it from North Slope Publications, just northslopepublications.com, you can buy it right off their website, and it takes $4.29 away from Amazon, and I'm all for that. It does put a little bit more in my pocket too, and I'm all for that. But it also keeps an independent publisher going, so people like me can continue to publish on a regular basis. Very shortly, they're going to have the 3 books, which we call the Empowered Accountability Series, on a 3-for-1 deal. I think the books are all $21.95, and they're going to offer them at some discount, probably around $50 or something like that. So please, if you're interested, reach out to North Slope and get one of these books. I think you'll find it useful. I sure had a ball writing it. So with that, I want to wrap up today. Thanks for going with me on this short journey on an accomplishment for me. Every book I finish is a huge relief, and at the same time, excuse me, I've now got the burden of having to get it out there. So if you like it, please write a good review. If you don't like it, write me personally, or write a bad review. I don't care. I want to see all the feedback I can get. Like always, this is just another resource for us to get better where we are with the resources at hand. And that's what we're all about here at Only Human. So like, share, follow, and I will see you again soon.